So then we moved to the Rutgers game, and in the Rutgers game, if you saw my preview was pretty accurate, right? It was a situation where I talked about how Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper were the offense for Rutgers. And outside of those two guys, there isn't much offense to speak of. And I thought that Alabama could have some success in this game, and Alabama potentially could run away with this game. And I was accurate, right? The only place where I was inaccurate is I expected Alabama to be able to run away with this game. And unfortunately, turnovers prevented us from doing that. Alabama had 20 turnovers in this game, and it was the reason why Rutgers stayed in this game to the very end, right? Alabama only wins this game by 5 when Alabama really was in control the majority of the game. And it largely was on the back of Dylan Harper just being an absolute do-it-all point guard, right? Harper kind of single-handedly carried Rutgers in this game. He has 37 points, 15 of 16 from the line, 11 of 16 from 2, right? Hit a ton of pull-ups. Not super effective from 3, and by and large, that was kind of Rutgers' pseudo downfall in this game, as they only shoot 2 of 13 from 3. And it just wasn't enough to be able to beat Alabama. If they had gotten a little better shooting from some other players around Bailey and Harper, they may have had a little bit of a chance. But unfortunately, Alabama, kind of had its way with all the players not named Harper and Bailey, right? Harper has 37, Ace Bailey has 22. It shows why these two guys are both going to be top 5 picks, maybe pick 2 and 3 from what we've heard. These guys absolutely look the part. They're going to give a lot of teams trouble this season. And it's a situation where if you do not have your A game, Harper and Bailey are going to make you pay, right? It's a situation where Houston is a completely different style of team, right? Houston definitely had LJ Cryer, who at moments, was kind of putting Houston on his back, was hitting big shots. And then you saw in overtime, his legs were just not under him, and he was not physically able to kind of keep the team on his back. Whereas Harper, for this entirety of this game, and granted this game did not go to overtime, but for the entirety of this game, Harper had the team on his back, was able to kind of do what he wanted at will, get to the free throw line absolutely at will, and continually score, right? So what this showed Alabama is, one, you can't turn over the ball 20 times, right? Alabama knows that. We had not seen a ton of turnovers from this team, but this is definitely something that definitely has to be a little worrisome, because we saw this also happen in the Oregon game that we'll talk about here in a second. Alabama did have a bit of a turnover problem in this tournament. The 15 turnovers against Houston is a decent amount, but it was an overtime game. Houston does a good job turning you over. That number did not really scare too many of us that know how Houston plays and the type of calls and non-calls that Houston has, right? If you think of how this game was called as compared to how the Houston game was called, they're completely different, right? Houston was a super physical game. There were possessions where 3 and 4 guys were on the floor and there still were no foul calls. In this game against Rutgers, it really felt like if you touched somebody, they were going to call a foul, right? That led to Harper getting 16 free throws. They shoot 35 free throws. Alabama shoots 36. Right, this was a very free throw heavy game in comparison to Houston, which was a substantially more physical game. So really just the way that these games were called was completely different. And I think some of the younger guys for Alabama had a little bit of a problem kind of adjusting to what this was. I think some of the younger guys potentially were expecting more foul calls to be made, right? So LeBaron Philon in this one has 4 points. He goes 2 of 2, but is not super effective overall in this game. Does turn it over 4 times. Mark also turns it over 5 times, right? This is not a super great game. The flow of the offense, right? When Alabama was flowing in the offense, they looked pretty good. But again, they just turned the ball over way too many times. In this one, the savior, Mark Sears, did do a pretty good job. Mo Diabate, again, goes 10 and 9 in 25 minutes. Grant Nelson does a good job with 17 points. Jared Stevenson hits his first threes of the season. He was 1 of 18. He ends up going 2 for 3 in this game. We'll talk a little bit more about him in the Oregon game when he really took a step forward. Aiden Holloway did not shoot super well in this Rutgers game. Not exactly sure what that was about. But overall, the key to this game was Alabama just can't turn the ball over, right? And from a defensive perspective, Alabama needs to understand how games are being called, because how games are being called is definitely going to impact how they're able to play, right? I think Alabama was trying early in this game to play how they played against Houston and get really up into people and really physical, and it just was being called way too often, right? So in this game, Alabama ends up having 5 guys with 4 fouls. Mark has 4, Cliff has 4, Mo, Darion, and Jaron all have 4, right? And this ends up kind of being a bit of a problem for Alabama with how they wanted to defend Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. The best guys for that, and I guess the big breakout stars for this game, is Darion Reed and Jared Stevenson. Both did pretty good jobs on those 2 guys, right? Darion Reed kind of put himself as a great defender. With that wingspan, he did a pretty good job by and large defending. He was one of our better defenders with some length, because Ace Bailey being 6'10", if you didn't have somebody with length, he was just going to shoot right over him. You couldn't just put a normal guard like a LeBaron Philon or a Latrell Wrightsell. He's just going to shoot right over the top of him. So you had to put some more size with Darion or Jaron. Were they elite defenders? Did they shut them down? No. But they definitely did a better job than some others. They did force some misses. Alabama was able to clean up the glass on this one. Alabama does win the rebounding battle. And like I said, if it's not for the turnovers, I think Alabama wins this game much more easily. Again, all credit to Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. They really did everything they could to try to keep Rutgers in this game. But Alabama does end up winning what was a very close game and what was a better game than I personally had expected it to be. But I do think that Rutgers is going to knock off some teams because of those 2 guys that you may not expect, just because those 2 guys can catch fire and at certain times are just unstoppable. And if you don't have the skill talent to be able to hang with them, they're going to do things to you that you're just not prepared for. So Alabama does win that game.